Welcome to Motorcycle News, and today we're going to be acting the fool with a pair of Supermotos. Now, on my left, I've got the 2026 KTM 690 SMCR, and this kind of typifies the classic Supermoto. It's an off-road based platform from the 690 Enduro, and big power single, long travel forks, 17-inch wheels, lots of skids, wheelies and fun. Now this is a slightly updated model, there's a bit more power this year, the electronics have changed, the dash and a few other bits and pieces, including a little bit more power up top, which I think is probably just to rain on Ducati's parade with the most powerful single, which they no longer have, KTM do. Nothing too big a change, we've ridden this before, absolutely love them. And on my right, we've got potentially the new guard in Supermoto. Now this is the Stark Varg Supermoto, funnily enough, and this is based on their kind of disruptive motocross and enduro bikes. And for years, we've been a little bit turning up our nose up at electric bikes, but this is probably the first bike to go, okay, we need to take these things seriously now, because this has been sort of doing the business in motocross, supercross particularly actually, where that instant hit of power really works, and enduro as well. They now compete in the Super Enduro World Championship, and they've been getting great results with these. And now they've given it the Supermoto treatment, so big brakes, small wheels, and road homologation as well. So interestingly, the figures for this are actually quite comparable with the petrol option, which isn't very often the case because, let's be fair, electric bikes are usually heavier, slower, poor range, and the performance just doesn't add up. But in some ways, this is faster. So we've got 80 horsepower here versus 70 odd for the KTM. We've got lower weight. We've got a measured 125 kilos for the Stark, and this is over 160 full of fuel. So actually, for the first time, we can compare them like for like. So naturally, with that interesting comparison, we wanted to get stuck in and test them back to back. So that's what we've been doing for the last 2 days. So we've been out on the local roads, terrorising B roads, a little bit of town, and then we went up to Stretton Kart Circuit for the evening as well to have a little bit of circuit fun as well. And myself and MCN's deputy editor Carl, we're not necessarily Supermoto gods, but we do like messing around with these things. So we wanted to make sure we kind of covered all the bases with these two bikes. So without further ado, I'm going to run you through how these two bikes compare, where the limitations of both of them are actually, because it was quite interesting and not necessarily what we expected from the outset. So I'll start with road performance, because that's where we're going to be riding these things most of the time. And I'll go with the old guard, the proven formula, if you like. And as we expected, the KTM is a barrel of fun. It's instant, it's direct, it's really aggressive and raw, and it's just an absolute barrel load of fun. What you get with this is a really kind of light, agile, sporty feel. If you're used to kind of big sports bikes and things like that, this is not dissimilar. You've got a real feel for the tyres. It's on Conti Attack SM2s, which are just like your droppings on a blanket, shall we say. And great WP suspension, loads of feel, loads of control for that. A little bit harsh in some circumstances, but you don't buy a bike like this expecting comfort like a Grand Tourer. And then there's the brakes. They are obviously only one disc, but that's all it needs. It doesn't weigh that much, and it's a really strong one as well. Loads of power, loads of feel, and if you like messing around, backing in, doing skids, things like that, it's got everything you need. Endos as well. Not that we'd ever do anything on public road, track of course. It's the whole package. Electronics too as well, which is something a few years ago, if you'd said Supermoto electronics, you'd have gone, no, what do you want that for? But actually, KTM are very good at electronics. They make it very intuitive, very easy through that kind of little dash. And you've got options of ABS, which you can turn off in various degrees. There's a Supermoto Plus option, which manages rear brake trailing. If you're trying to back it in and get it sideways, it helps you manage that if that's not a skill you kind of have straight off the bat. Traction control too. Obviously, this is a really sort of punchy, torquey sort of bike. So if you kind of a little bit less confident, or if it's wet or something like that, you can dial it up and down as you need it, or turn it off fully if you want to take accidents into your own hands. And then we've got an up and down quick shifter as well, so you can just ride those hits of torque and just kind of snap through the gears, go blasting up speed, and then come absolutely nailing it into corners, just stabbing back down through the gearbox as well. It's everything you would expect from a traditional Supermoto, and those little changes they have just moved it on a bit, but they've not ruined it either. And then the Stark, on the other hand, it's not so much swapping bikes, it's almost like swapping sports. It's totally different and it's really alien to start with. And particularly if you've got off something with clutch and a gears, you go to pull away by holding the back braking, stabbing at a lever that doesn't actually exist. So that's a bit of a head fry to start with. And then you go to pull away, and even in the lower modes, there's just kind of this instant kind of jerk as it picks up and goes. And it's just this seamless kind of drive forward, and it feels like you're instantly at 50 miles an hour, which is not far from the truth, to be fair. Even in the sort of modes 3 and 4, which kind of sort of 50, 60 horsepower, something like that, it's just so quick and so effortless. It's kind of really alarming to sort of get your head around from the first few miles. And then the chassis that's probably more alien than the motor, actually. You can soon get your head around that, because when it comes down to it, it's very simple. You twist, you go, you throttle off, you slow down, particularly if you've got the regenerative braking turned up. And you soon get your head around the left lever giving you the back brake rather than the clutch, and actually that's kind of a real positive. Obviously we've seen that in short circuit racing, where scooter brakes, as they're called, have become a sort of real performance tool. But the chassis, like I say, is kind of the bit that's been most difficult for us to get our heads around. It's very firmly sprung, very firmly damped as well, so there's very little in the way of weight transfer and also shock absorption as well, so you feel every last little bump. And even when you get hard on the front brakes, it doesn't dip much, it doesn't squat much under power. Even when you're unleashing all that torque, if you stick it in mode 5 and stick 80 horsepower to that back Pirelli, it just doesn't give you much back. And sort of counterintuitively to what you usually get with the Supermoto, where they're great at sort of slow speed, point and squirt, flicking it around, this is actually better with more speed. The more load you get on it, the better it is. The more feel you get for those tyres, because the really low speed stuff, and I'll come to a bit more of the track stuff later, but on the kart circuit, sometimes it was really difficult to kind of feel what was going on, and it doesn't make you very confident. And just, I previously mentioned the brakes a little bit. The brakes are probably my biggest criticism of this bike. It's got a great big Brembo style Emma caliper and big disc on it as well, but there's something wrong in the hydraulic ratio there. It's got a great big master cylinder on it, and what that has done is given it a really short lever travel, really kind of lacking in feel. And that also throws out the power as well. There's very little braking power there. It's very hard to kind of know what you're doing with it and sort of place it where you want it, which is a real shame. Back brake is great. It's a very conventional mass cylinder, and the ratios there are good, so you can play with that all you want. And actually, if you put it in full engine braking mode, full regenerative braking, you can bury the front as hard as you can, as much as you can kind of trust the front at least, and trail a bit of back brake, and that engine braking does exactly what you do on a KTM when you stab it back a few gears and lean on the slip clutch, and it starts to back in, which takes a little bit of getting used to, because it's a very different way of controlling the bike, and it's a little bit unnerving because it does feel synthetic. A combustion engine is obviously very mechanical and very visceral, and if you've been riding for a few years, you come to know what to expect with these things. So when you start playing around and learning these new kind of skills and silly bits of fun that you do with Supermotos, you know where you are. But trying to apply that to the Stark is very difficult, actually. So it's going to take a better man than me to kind of do it instantly. But it is in there, and with more time you would get it. The only limitation to that would be the steering lock. It doesn't have a lot at all. I mean, I'll just gently turn it there on its stand, but as you can see, it's not got a great deal at all. Whereas the KTM is like a typical dirt bike, it's got much more, so if you are a real kind of backing in demon, you can get it all the way out and you're not going to run out of lock and get into bother with it. And then also with the Stark, it's very narrow, very small, so you are super exposed. And I never thought I'd say this about a KTM Supermoto, but this actually feels comfy when you get back off that and onto this. The seat's that little bit wider, the whole bike is that bit wider, and in comparison, the suspension is a bit softer, so it suddenly feels that little bit more rounded. And of course, you're starting from a slightly softer start point, so you could mess around with the WP's adjusters and make it even softer. And actually, in some ways, this is quite a friendly bike. I think it doesn't necessarily need somebody that has kind of these mad Supermoto skills and is going to go everywhere on one wheel or sideways. You can knock the power back on this. It's got different kind of power throttle response modes, so you can tame it a little bit. And of course, the throttle goes both ways. You've got kind of 6 gears to play with as well, so you can kind of give as much or as little as you want, whereas that is a little bit more straightforward. It's going or it's stopping. And it takes a lot of self-restraint because there's no gear changes or power curves to kind of rein you in. You open throttle and you just keep going until you back off yourself or you hit something, in all honesty, which in some ways is part of the fun. It's a really unique experience. In some ways, like I say, it's quite different from this, but equally it's that same very simplistic, animalistic, hooligan kind of fun. And I won't get into too much of what's been going on because we'd never break the law, obviously, but we had our fill with that one. And I mentioned we went to a kart circuit, which allowed us to have totally legal fun. And I expected the Stark being lighter, being more powerful, not having a clutch and a gearbox to play with. I thought that was really going to shine there, and that's where the kind of slightly more road-focused KTM would fall down. But it was the absolute opposite, in all honesty. Stark's really rigid chassis just doesn't work at low speed. You can't really kind of get on the brakes hard enough, you can't get enough suspension travel, you can't generate that feel for the front tyre. And coming out of slow corners as well, it's running on Pirelli Diablo Rosso 4s, and they're a good tyre, but they're not really designed for an application this light. I feel they're developed more for your kind of A2 sports bikes, your Ninja 500s and things like that. So this is probably not really generating the load at low speeds that these tyres need to work the best. And it always just feels like it's on edge. It's really kind of difficult to get to grips with. And you kind of lose the benefit of that insane torque and that big power because you end up pegging it back to get something where there is that grip there and you kind of feel safe really kind of opening it up. And again, coming back to the brakes, when you've got tight hairpins and little nadgery turns on a kart circuit, it's just, when you really want to kind of feather a brake in and trail it into a corner, that caliper and that combo just won't give you what you need to really kind of play with it. So it was a little bit of a disappointment, really. But obviously, we don't spend all our time on kart circuits. So where do we stand overall on the Stark versus the KTM? Is this the new guard? Now, price isn't really a factor in your decision whether to kind of go with the new technology or the sort of proven formula. £10,990 in the UK, whereas this is 10,600, so there's a few £100 in it. Nothing to write home about. But KTM still offers a much more complete package, and I think crucially, most of the time, it's more fun. And as a real petrol head, I love two-strokes, big twins, triples, kind of really charismatic engines. I expected to not especially gel with the Stark because of the motor, but actually that's the bit I liked because it's a real party piece. It's just wild how it just goes zipping from 0 to a decent speed, shall we say, with absolutely seamless drive, and it'll pick the front wheel up at kind of all manner of kind of crazy speeds. It's a real kind of event, and I quite like that. Okay, there's no sound apart from a kind of a whining sort of hairdryer kind of noise or an RC car, something like that. But that's the bit I liked. It's the rest of it at the moment I feel it probably needs a bit more development time. Stark say this does have different geometry to their motocross and enduro bikes, but I don't think it's different enough. And if they have made it kind of quite a lot more different, it's kind of gone in the wrong direction. It probably needs to be a little bit lower, a little bit softer, and maybe even more raked out, because it doesn't need to be quite as aggressive as it is. It needs to generate a bit more feel, which is where KTM's kind of long-standing experience, like 20, 30 years or more, building dirt bikes in the first instance and then supermotos off the back of them, that really sort of, that's the strength of the 690. You can just trust it to the absolute hilt. Even if you've got everything turned off, you know exactly what the front tyre is doing. You can load the back tyre until it's just on the brink of letting go. There's just so much feel, you can really trust it, and it becomes your kind of hooligan playmate, and it's just such a brilliant experience. Not everybody should buy one. It'll do your head in if you're kind of doing long distances or you live in an area where all the roads are quicker rather than tight back lanes, but everybody should try one at least once. Whereas the Stark, I feel, not through dint of the electronic power plant, it needs a little bit more development elsewhere. And to be honest, we should probably expect that, because Stark are quite new to building motorcycles in general. And while they've kind of got on quite well in the dirt world, the road is a different place, and equally, supermoto competition is something else. I'm not aware of anybody racing one of these yet, but it'll be interesting to see how they get on with that. And maybe a bit of development time will sort of feed into that, and they will start to do well, and hopefully that will feed back down to the customer models as well. But for now, it's not the future. It's a very interesting option, and like I say, if you can get your hands on a demo anywhere, it's very much worth your time trying it. But for Christ's sakes, be careful. There's no ABS, there's no traction control, and it's one of the most direct, wild machines you can buy. So that wraps up this test. If you want to see more electric bikes on MCN, please let us know. If you want to see more Supermoto in general, please let us know. And drop a few comments down below and tell us how you feel about Starks, Supermotos, electric bikes in general, and how you feel about what we've kind of felt with this test. Thank you for watching. See you again next time.